So Mikey, we're going to take a closer look at last week's rescue operation inside Iran. We've already had quite a bit of detail from the White House, but what for you are the unanswered questions?
Yeah, the first part of that rescue package seemed to make sense. So we knew that there was known combat search and rescue capability that was being used in that first F-15M and rescue. I think we've got a picture of the F-15 jet there. So
that's the one that was shot down.
That's the one that was shot down, and the first rescue occurred on the pilot, which sits in the front seat. The real questions start to arise in the rescue of the second M and the weapons systems officer or operator. So firstly, I would ask, what was that F-15 Strike Eagle that we can see on screen? What was that doing so deep in Iran, and what was its mission? The second bit of where questions start to arise is we've got video footage here of when the US destroyed their own HC-130J Hercules and MH-6 Little Bird helicopters at a forward operating base deep inside Iran. This is the video that we saw. This is the aftermath of it and at that FOB. And this forward operating base is actually in the vicinity of Isfahan, which is the location of one of Iran's nuclear enrichment sites.
One of the 3 nuclear sites.
Yeah, outside of Fordow and Natanz. Before the aircraft were destroyed, let's just show the viewers what those US assets look like. It's an HC-130J aircraft. These aircraft are used in combat search and rescue, but also deployed on special forces operations. And then there was also evidence that there were MH-6 Little Birds at that forward operating base that had also been destroyed. It's kind of the capability of choice for light helicopters in special forces operations.
Right, there was quite a significant number of special forces operators.
Yeah, the reports are that there were about 100 US SF operators that were flown into that forward operating base. So the big question is, that's a significant amount of capability and risk to rescue 1M.
Is it possible that they were there because there was a threat from the IRGC and the Basij forces in that particular area that might have been closing in on their position?
Yeah, it's certainly a possibility, and we've spoken about the Basij before. They range in numbers of up to 200,000, up to over 1 million on a wartime footing. So it is a possibility, but then it goes back to that question of what was the F-15E doing deep inside Iran in the first place.
Yeah, and then there are the questions also of why the HC-130Js were destroyed on the ground. Why would you do that?
Yeah, so those reports were that those aircraft were sinking into the ground. That was the reason that was given at the forward operating base. But when you look at open source intelligence chatter, it suggests that these aircraft could have actually taken enemy fire on the initial infiltration, which wasn't anything to do with the rescue of that second airman. The HC-130 is basically flying into the forward operating base to conduct a separate mission, taking incoming fire, and then basically being rendered inoperative for the exfiltration.
And they're standing on a sort of makeshift runway, or maybe an old runway that the Iranians had run. And it brings us back to Isfahan and its significance to Iran's enrichment program.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lack of oversight of that enrichment program since Operation Midnight Hammer in 2025. But it was, or it still could be, the location of the missing 440 kilograms of 60% enriched uranium, 90% being weapons grade. So a large amount of that uranium was known to be located at Isfahan, or still could be.
Right, you're almost going there. Are you suggesting that there were 2 different operations here, and there could have been an operation ongoing to lift the uranium?
Yeah, I think that's literally the nub of the question that we're trying to get at here. 440 kilograms of uranium is almost half a ton, and you can't seize that amount with MH-6 Little Birds. I think we've got the Little Bird that we can bring up again. That aircraft, when it has the operators on board, there's not a lot of power left, or indeed space inside that. However, what we have seen appearing on open source intelligence is footage of a US Air Force. It's called a C-295W air transport aircraft. And those aircraft, there's very few in the US Air Force. They're from the 427th Special Operations Squadron. Now, it was purportedly flying on open source intelligence low over the western Iranian desert around April the 5th. That's when the footage started to come online.
Which will put it in that sort of vicinity.
Puts it in that vicinity and that timeline as importantly. So the US, as I said, just a few of these assets, and they're designed really for short and unprepared landing strips.
Right, and would that aircraft be powerful enough to lift that amount of uranium, half a ton of it?
Whether it was there to do so is questionable, but it certainly has the capacity to do so.
significant amount of detail that we have. A lot of special forces operators there, destroyed aircraft on the ground, nearly half a ton of missing enriched uranium in the near vicinity. A lot of detail that we still don't know, but it's fascinating nonetheless to look at the theories that have been explored on open source intelligence. We'll continue to track that. Mikey, for the moment, thank you very much indeed.